Hello and welcome back to a whole new season of Murder with Friends, the show where two friends get together and talk about the darker sides of history. I'm your host, Grace Baldridge, and I am so excited to be back for a season 2 of Murder with Friends. We have so much stuff coming. We're gonna be revamping our entire set. We're gonna be tossing to our own packages, so much. And we wanted to kick it off with a case that you guys have requested and a guest that I have requested. So Jason Carter, welcome to Murder with Friends.
Hi, Grace, I'm so honored to be here. When you were like, Jason, do you want to do Murder with Friends? I had to pull over. I was driving on the 101 and thought like, absolutely, love this show, it's phenomenal.
And I actually approached you about a specific case that we'd sort of talked about a little bit before even approaching about doing Murder with Friends. So tell the viewers what we're gonna be talking about today. This is one that they really have requested in the comments and I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, Jeffrey Dahmer. I mean, when you think about serial killers and you think about just the fascinating thing that is true crime, Jeffrey Dahmer is always at the top of the list for me and a lot of people. So today we're gonna delve into it and really dissect and pull apart his life, why he did what he did, and his subsequent death.
Yeah, he is one of, by far one of the most notorious American serial killers. And a lot of people probably have some preconceived ideas about who he was and the crimes that he committed. So just to address that off the top, let's take a look at the Jeffrey Dahmer that you probably have heard about.
The crimes of Jeffrey Dahmer made the world cringe. 17 murders. Cannibalism. Sex with the dead. A man who made his Milwaukee apartment into a violent and erotic death chamber.
One thing led to another. It took more and more deviant type behaviors to satisfy my urges.
Dahmer even tried to create living sex zombies by injecting acid into their brains. Jeffrey Dahmer, it seemed, was as close to raw evil as the world had ever known.
But obviously before he became one of the most notorious, infamous serial killers, he was a kid that was born. He was a boy that by all accounts for a time seemed incredibly normal. Jeffrey Dahmer was born May 21st, 1960 in West Allis, Wisconsin. He was the first of 2 sons born to Lionel and Joyce Dahmer. And Jason, how would you describe this early upbringing of Jeffrey Dahmer?
Well, Grace, that's a great question because a lot of people tend to think that Jeffrey Dahmer came from this super tumultuous, very violent
We see
upbringing.
that so often with serial killers. They had a trouble at home, and then maybe that translated to some violent acts, but not the case with Dahmer.
No, and a lot of psychologists that were on the case with Dahmer, and then after his death, that really did their research as well, were shocked that someone like him that grew up in a loving household. His father was very doting. Now, his father wasn't the most outgoing man, but he was still very much involved in Dahmer's upbringing. And then the mother, Joyce, to say that she was a great mom, but she had her own issues. We'll get into that. But right, he was loved, cared for, and seemingly happy as a child.
But there was a change in his life that took place pretty early on. So even his father has said in interviews, he seemed really happy, outgoing. He liked playing with kids. He liked animals. He had a dog named Frisky. Whatever, sure, name a dog Frisky. To me, it's more of a cat name, but that you do you, Jeff. And then there was a change that even his father said he was different from this point on, and it's something that you don't hear about a lot. Can you address that for our viewers?
Absolutely. Well, a lot of people have a lot of theories of why, how, when, and Jeffrey changed. Because if you read about some of the people who knew him prior, they said that he was very boisterous. He was very outgoing as a kid through his teens, but he did have a double hernia surgery when he was young that he actually was awake for, and he was worried that he was going to lose his genitalia, and so that they think.
Be aware of that as a kid from an early age, that I have genitals and I could lose them, that must have been an incredibly significant thing.
Absolutely, and Lionel, he asked his father, Dad, am I going to lose these parts of mine? His dad reassured him that he wasn't going to, but they say that's when things took a turn. That's when he became more of an introvert. That's when he became more shy, that he became a little, I wouldn't say erratic, but started to display or exhibit
strange behavior.
Strange behavior, absolutely.
And one of these strange behaviors that his father has pointed out is the bone incident. And what is the bone incident?
Jeffrey took a liking to finding out after the double hernia surgery, how the internals of things, how things worked on the inside. He was very fascinated with roadkill.
Dead animals. He didn't torture animals. He actually had love for his pets. But
he loved dead
things.
animals. Yeah, so he would collect carcasses off the highway that he would find in backyards, and he would essentially dissect them, pull out their innards, and really marvel at what was inside. So the father had smelled this really unsettling smell around the house and finally found out that under the house Jeffrey had collected numerous carcasses and there was bones there as well.
And at the time he was like, he didn't think much of it, but now looking back he thinks, oh, that could have been an early sign. So Lionel completes a degree from Marquette and he moves the family to Doylestown, Ohio in 1966. Jeffrey named his younger brother, David. And then shortly after that, his mother, Joyce, is hospitalized for anxiety. Jeff is only 10 years old. And this would be the beginning of sort of a fractured relationship with the mother. Can you just sort of sum that up? What was going on with Jeff and his mom? It wasn't necessarily abusive, but it was definitely not the same doting love that he experienced with his father. Right,
well, the mom was, by some accounts, very needy of attention from the father. She had a pain pill addiction problem. There are some people who say that when she was pregnant with Jeffrey, she had these seizure fits that would come on from her abusing barbiturates. All these things about Joyce that we later find out by some people were actually true. But nonetheless, that created a sense of tension within the household, and Jeff again adding to his already shy nature that he's been diving into, just went further into that. So again, as a young child, you need both parents.
Yeah, and it did force Lionel to be in the maternal caregiver position, and it's unclear if he was really aware of the attention that Jeffrey needed. And I actually have a clip right now of Lionel Dahmer reflecting on an incident with Jeffrey Dahmer where he felt his son's development went awry.
I really have become convinced that was sort of the starting point in this downward spiral of his, and it was associated with his puberty. And when you have hormones kicking into this terrible mixture, what he's doing, he's investigating insides of animals. And his sexuality was developing at the same time.
Teenage Jeff was discovering that he felt sexually attracted only to men. But the thoughts of sex with men became interlocked with fantasies of killing another man and dismemberment. The fantasies excited him, but they were unspeakable.
This is a huge theme in Jeffrey Dahmer's story that I honestly feel a lot of documentaries out there don't delve into thoroughly enough. So it's something I want to talk about with you today. Jeffrey Dahmer's sexuality and his sexual fantasies and how they were so intrinsically tied to violent fantasies as well will play a huge part in how he develops into a serial killer. So let's talk a little bit about his struggles with his sexuality and how that evolved to what would become the Jogger story.
Yeah, absolutely. So like as the father said, with puberty comes these emotions, comes these feelings that you're not really sure what is happening. I mean, anyone that is of the LGBTQ community can attest to that. The Jogger story was where Jeffrey had a strange attraction to a jogger. He wanted to actually capture the jogger for himself, engage in some kind of sexual activity, and possibly harm the jogger, but it never came to fruition because it dropped because he never enacted the plan.
But he went so far as to go to this jogger's route. Now, by this time, he's a teenager. Hormones for teenagers, you're surging with hormones.
Right.
And if you are figuring out that your sexuality is not heterosexual, like you and I have both done, it's terrifying. And it's this insane secret. And now knowing that that is tied to violent fantasies as well, I can only imagine the source of shame and secrecy. And he becomes even more sullen. He starts drinking.
Right.
And the fantasy was that the fantasy that he almost interacted was that that he was going to go to the path where this jogger was jogging, and he was going to club him with a bat, and then he was going to do something with the body. But then when he actually went there with the bat hiding in the bushes, the jogger just happened to not jog by that particular day.
Right.
But I think that was a turning point for Jeffrey, where he went to that position. He was ready to club this guy. He was ready to act violently. And very soon after his high school graduation, we will see that his mother gains custody of the brother after his parents' divorce, moves back to Wisconsin, leaving Jeffrey unattended at the home in Ohio. And this leads to his first murder. And let's take a look at that. On the evening of June 18th, Jeffrey Dahmer's living nightmare would become a reality. In what can be called an act of spontaneous misfortune, Dahmer crosses paths with 18-year-old hitchhiker Stephen Mark Hicks. Stephen was making his way to a rock concert in the area. Dahmer persuades him to come to his place for some beers. Several hours and drinks later, Stephen says he wants to leave. Dahmer doesn't want him to leave. He doesn't want to be alone again. He bludgeons Stephen from behind with a 10-pound weight, strangles him with the bar of a dumbbell, strips the body, and masturbates over Stephen's corpse. And here's something that I think is interesting about the story. There have been a couple accounts that said that he and Stephen hooked up, that they had sex with each other, and then some that will just omit that fact, or they will just not even mention, they'll say they hung out. I think it's really important that there was some sort of a relation that took place that night, because that led to this feeling of rejection within Jeffrey Dahmer, like, you can't leave.
Right.
Oh no, people that have free will leave. I must act violently in order for them to stay.
Absolutely, Grace, that's a great point. And also we find out later on through Jeffrey's own admission that it was about control. He wanted to, you can put two and two together. The mom leaves, the dad leaves. There's this sense of abandonment. There's this lack of control there. So I agree, I think the two were intimate. I do think that the person, probably Stephen, did want to leave, and that threatened Jeffrey's security. He wanted to have control over every situation. He wanted to be able to control these people. So by someone, again, free will saying, hey, this ain't gonna happen, that angered him. And also, again, at that early age, dealing with his own feelings, his own guilt, not knowing what he's feeling, that just exacerbated the whole situation.
And we also see that control in how he dumped the body. He dissected the body, he bleached the bones, he flushed the bodily solution down the toilet and scattered the bone fragments in the backyard. And that was the first of what would become a descent into madness, a descent into his demons. And when we come back in part 2, we're gonna tell you all about that descent.